back then there was a term commercial art. That was the term for what became graphic design, but it was commercial art. And basically it was the idea of, I didn't have the vision that a lot of people get to have today. I can tell you, Vaibhav, when I was your age, this makes me sound like an old man, but when I was your age, starting a podcast, there wasn't even podcasts. Like doing what you're doing, sharing content, creating content, self-education online, doing interviews with other creatives all over the world like you're doing. It wasn't even an option. Like didn't even exist. That's good to know. Yeah, you can see what other people are doing, and then it inspires you to figure out how to do it yourself. Most freelancers are brought in to just design the thing. The client's like, I need somebody to design the thing, and that's most freelancers. But it's not impossible to shift and become an expert in the eyes of your client and have that seat at the table where you're helping them understand their problem and solve that problem for them. Start to treat those people like a friend and be supportive of them. And then who knows what doors it will open. You mentioned Mitri, our mutual friend, and I've been friends with her for like 5 years, and it all has happened in the DMs, and I've never sent any work to her. She's never sent any coaching students to me or anything. It's just been a mutual friendship, but I have a high degree of trust with her. I've done collaborations with her a couple of times, but you don't have any guarantee, and there are very few guarantees in business. What we can say, this is what I'd say to a client, what we can say is that we do great work. We know it will generate results for you, and some of those results will be intangible. They might be brand perception or brand awareness, that the more people have a higher esteem for your brand, it will make it easier for your salespeople to close deals because your brand looks better. But that's not really tangible. You just make the investment with the expectation that that's going to happen. And that's what design-led businesses do.
So, hello everyone, welcome to the new episode of the VYRus Show. And today we have a very special guest. I will be quite nervous today, but bear with me with that. Today we have Michael Janda, and people who I have been a huge fan of Michael. And before jumping straight to the podcast and getting straight to you, I was looking at contents and topics that I would like to discuss with you. And man, you have covered each and everything. I was so confused, like what should I talk about? Man, this man has literally covered everything that a creative needs, and that is also available for free. People usually charge for that, but you have so much great free knowledge out there. So, for the people who are living under a rock, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Oh, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. I love doing these. I love meeting people all over the world and building new friendships and stuff. So it's super fun for me. So thank you for having the courage to send me a DM and to make this happen. I really, really love it. Introducing myself, Mike Janda is my name. I started an agency back in 2002, which is like a long time ago now. And I started just as a freelancer, and then I built that into a full agency. I had 20 employees and cool studio space. We were doing work for Disney and Google and ABC and NBC, Fox and Warner Brothers, and lots of great clients. So I'm super grateful for that. In 2015, I sold my agency to a friendly competitor in my area, and we became the agency EKR. And that agency, we had 80 employees, and we're doing a lot of revenue and had some great clients. And I stayed there throughout my buyout years. And then I left there in 2018 and started doing what I'm doing now, which is just education, mentoring, coaching, content for creative entrepreneurs. And I love what I'm doing now the most out of anything that I've done in my career. But I couldn't do what I'm doing now had I not gone through all the other stuff in my career. So I'm grateful for my history, and especially grateful for what I'm doing now.
That is absolutely great, I would say. I was reading through your about section on your website, and I was like, man, this person has such great experience that I will be like complete a beginner. I'm a completely noob in front of you. I don't know anything as compared to what you have seen in the industry. So that was a pretty daring step for me to ask you for a podcast on a topic that might be helpful for that definitely will be helpful for some people in the creative. So as you see, as you saw, as you heard about Michael's introduction, we have a celebrity here. He has done such great worked with such great dream clients of ours. So huge respect, man. Huge respect. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So I will go a bit backwards. Like we all know what you already mentioned that about your agency and all. Let's talk about something before becoming a designer. How was life back then? Before you ever thought about design and all?
It's interesting. So in my kind of teenage years, when I was in high school, I did all the art classes, and I was in ceramics and painting and drawing and all those classes. And back then there was a term commercial art. That was the term for what became graphic design, but it was commercial art. And basically it was the idea of you can do art and get paid for it, but most of your art ends up in some kind of print format. It was advertising, print media, books, magazines, these kinds of things, layout work. We didn't have the diversity back then like we do now with web and apps, and branding really became a thing. This was kind of the early days of branding too. If you think about like Paul Rand and the amazing logos he did, that was like the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s. So even in the 80s, when I was a teenager, it was all still kind of new in comparison to what we know today. And now you see this graphic design or this creative industry, and it's so expansive compared to what it was. So I didn't have the vision that a lot of people get to have today. I can tell you, Vaibhav, when I was your age, this makes me sound like an old man, but when I was your age, starting a podcast, there wasn't even podcasts. Like doing what you're doing, sharing content, creating content, self-education online, doing interviews with other creatives all over the world like you're doing, it wasn't even an option. Like didn't even exist back then. So my vision was really lacking in my earlier formative years. I didn't have any kind of vision on what my career could become. And now I do push creatives, and I like to highlight people like you that have a vision so much bigger than what I had back when I was starting out in my career. And your potential future is just unlimited. And hopefully you can see that, because there's just no end to what you can do in your career and the importance of creative services in the world that we have today. So I was just like, in my early formative years, I was like, okay, so maybe someday I'll be like a creative director, whatever that is, and I'll be making, enough money to support a little family, but I'll never be rich. That's what I thought. I would be just an okay, make ends meet kind of an artist. And that's been far from the truth. I had such a small vision.
That is really interesting, because having such a small vision made you do such great things. And if you had such great vision, then you must have been like, yeah. But
it
still,
must
when
have
you
been,
did great.
I did, and I'm super grateful. But it was when I first caught the vision. So this is the late 90s is when my career started, 1996, 1997. And the internet had just started to become a thing. People needed websites, and everybody who graduated from university before 96, 97 didn't have any knowledge of how to build websites. My senior year of university, we had one module in my final class of my senior final class as a designer or as a studio art major that was about web design. And we learned a little bit of HTML and how to upload files to a server. And that was it. And so when I first got my first couple jobs, nobody in the job that I was working at knew anything about web design at all. So, and I had this little micro knowledge, but I got super, super hungry to learn more. And now the internet existed and you could view source like we can do on a website now, where you can inspect elements and you can go into the little inspector and see the code that is sitting there. In the early days of the internet, that's how we all learned how to build websites. We would all just view source of somebody else's code and figure out what they were doing to build the thing that they had on their site. And then you would adapt that into your site. That was the learning process. But I got super, super hungry to self-educate. And that's what made the biggest difference in my whole career, was just continually feeding myself with knowledge.
That was a very interesting story, and that I think the hunger of self education that makes someone different from the whole crowd and all, and that push past the limits. Yeah,
that's a big difference. Yeah, you have to have it. You're 23
Exactly.
and you have a podcast. Did anybody teach you how to make a podcast, or did you just go and view source, essentially like watching YouTube videos, buying equipment, plugging things in, experimenting to try and figure out how to make a podcast? I'm almost positive that's probably how you did it. Is that how you did it?
Absolutely. I have a story about that. I will tell you. Yeah. So that
Good,
I was watching. Yeah, I was watching your podcast only. It was a live stream with Chris, Ben, and you were doing a sales call, and it was a very interesting thing. Yeah. So I thought, why not I can try something like this? Why not I can do something like this for the people in the industry of here? Like in India, there is not as much awareness of design and branding as compared to out of the world, all other world. So I thought, why not do this something? And take India to another level and to a better level. So you, Chris, Ben, and all these people have played a very huge role in that. I expect and view source for a part. Yeah. So that was a huge inspiration for me.
That's good to know. Yeah, you can see what other people are doing, and then it inspires you to figure out how to do it yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one thing I would like to understand, that in your childhood, in your teenage age, when the commercial art was a thing, apart from making thing for money, like apart from making thing for commercial purpose, was there anything that made you a better designer when you grew up in terms of a childhood, like any hobby, any kind of stuff like that?
Yeah. You're trying to psychoanalyze me now, which is good. And I think that this is like deep in the heart of how I'm wired. I grew up with 4 brothers, and we grew up by the woods on a lake in the Midwest. It was outside Chicago, a couple hours outside Chicago in northern Indiana. And I loved my childhood. But my parents had 5 boys in a small house. We all shared bedrooms. We had great outdoor life, but outdoors, my life was like survival of the fittest. My brothers and I always just fighting, wrestling, and getting on each other, and just that kind of rough growing up and catching animals and all that stuff. It was that upbringing. I was the second oldest, and my older brother is only a year older than I am. And I think that in my wiring, I know I'm competitive, but I think that that's why I'm so competitive. And so the thing that drives me is just the competitive nature that I have because of growing up in this kind of dog-eat-dog world with my brothers. I'm super, super competitive, and it drives me to always try and be better and be the best at what I'm doing. And if somebody else has a podcast, I can make a podcast. I can do as good a job or better than somebody else making a podcast. I can make content as good as somebody else or better, or I can make YouTube. YouTube is my next thing to conquer. I want to build my YouTube channel. And I'm sitting there going, man, I can build a freaking YouTube channel. I can grow my YouTube channel and make it big. I can do that because other people did it. And I always was that way with my brothers. It was like, if one of my brothers could do it, well, certainly I can do it too. And so I think that's kind of one of the things on how I'm built in my life. So outside of the design, artistic, creative side, I'm just driven that way and ambitious.
That reflects everywhere. That competitiveness is everywhere in your work, in your agency, in your books. About to come to your books also.
It is.
So
that's what it was. I was like, I can write a book. If somebody else can write a book, I can write a book. Or if somebody else can build an agency, I can build a cool agency. I can do this. I was always driven that way.
That makes a great foundation, I would say, of a person as an individual, not as a creative, just as a person. If you are competitive by nature, if you have a very strong drive of doing something, you can do anything.
You can. Honestly, right now, you're in India right now, and there's no limit to what you can do in your career in 2024. Like there used to be 20 years ago for you to have a vision of building a big podcast and helping millions of people. Like that was impossible. That was an impossible dream 20 years ago. Now you can be young and you can decide, you know what, that's what I want to accomplish. And you actually can do it because the internet or the worldwide creative community can access you now in a way that it never could before. It's never been easier to really achieve any dream that you want. You could build a cool agency. Maitri, who we talked about, a mutual friend of ours who we've both done content with, she's doing that. She's building her agency. She's based in India. She's built an audience of people that admire her and like her, and she has a couple of people that are working for her. I mean, she's doing that right now. There's no limitation anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Hi, Maitri, if you're watching, we just did a podcast with her as well.
Yeah, we did.
So, yeah. You also did one. I also did one. So, yeah. Cool. Pretty interesting. Like it keeps getting interesting talking to you, man. I have never experienced such energy before on this podcast. Thank you. Thank you once again.
So fun.
So tell us about something before you started your agency. The part when you were when you were working as a freelancer. How was life? How was your mindset?
Oh, I was afraid. I watched one of your videos yesterday, by the way, on your Instagram, where you were talking about how freelancing is hard. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. This was your video. It was like, it's hard. I didn't know it was going to be so hard. You just kept saying this kind of thing over and over again. I was like, oh man, you get it. You get it. It is hard. It is hard. Anyway, it was scary, and I was kind of thrown into it. I was looking for jobs. It was 2002, and it was after September 11th in the United States, the terrorist attack on the Twin Towers, and the stock market was all bolstered up with .com businesses. Everybody was funneling money into .com startups. And then after September 11th, it was like a shift where people started to realize, okay, I actually want my money to be invested into a company that's actually making money or has a plan to make money someday. And so people started to just sell off all of these tech stocks that were unprofitable. And that created layoffs. And I was working at Fox. I was a creative director at Fox at the time. And that we had layoffs over our team. And everybody else was getting laid off. And agencies were going out of business. And it was this big, scary time. And I was looking for jobs. I was living in Los Angeles. And I was looking for jobs, applying to jobs, hoping to land a job. Now, as my friends from Fox were getting laid off, they started to send me freelance work. So I'm sitting here praying to find a job, and what I keep getting is freelance work. And the freelance work became more than what my salary was in just a short amount of time. And so I was kind of thrown into freelancing reluctantly. I didn't go and say, I'm going to go and be a freelancer and I'm going to go and conquer the mountain. I didn't do it that way. I was afraid, and I just needed to make money to be able to feed my kids. That was my driver. So a lot of my first couple years as a freelancer were super fear-based. I was driven by fear and motivated by fear. And it wasn't until I kind of broke free from that and realized, okay, this is my life path. And it's not just to freelance and make enough money to support my family. This can be bigger than that. I could actually build a little agency here. So I started hiring people, and I got some studio space near my house for cheap. It was like in the basement of this building. It was their storage room, and we cleaned all the junk out, and they leased it to us for super cheap. And that was my first studio space. So I was still fear driven, but I was taking the steps to scale. I don't recommend people do it my way. That freelancing based on fear. Freelance because you choose to, because you want to scale into something else. And scaling doesn't mean you have to go and hire a bunch of employees. I love the people who have a digital nomad life where they just freelancing and they live in Bali for 6 months, and then they go live in Barcelona for 3 months, and then they go and live in Greece for 3 months. I love those people. So you can create whatever dream life you want, but choose what you want to do. Don't just do it because you're afraid. It's like the lamest, scariest, most uncomfortable way to start a business is to do it based on fear. Do it based on ambition and drive to achieve some dream that you have, even if that dream is just a lifestyle dream and not scaling into some big agency.
That is so true. Like, I can resonate with that. I am at the same journey. It's been like 3-4 months since I started full-time freelancing. I graduated in May. I resigned from my job and I shifted flats and went all into my business. And here I am. Like, I have decent clients, not, I would say, huge, but still, it is in the foundation phase.
Yeah.
I'm part of Accelerator as well. So, yeah, Ben is great. Stephanie is great. The whole everything, the future is great. So,
yeah.
As you also said, it is hard. It is fear. And for me, fear is also the thing that is driving me and that is motivating me. So, I can relate to that a lot.
Yeah.
So,
there's always a little bit of fear. I think people are driven by either two different things. Entrepreneurs, you're either driven by fear or you're driven by ambition. And I use the analogy of, like, if you're going to go and climb a mountain, if you're hiking to climb a mountain, you can climb a mountain for two different reasons. The first reason is because the valley that you're in is flooding, and you have to climb the mountain to escape the flood. And that's a fear-driven mountain climbing experience. Or you can climb the mountain because you want to conquer the summit and put your flag in the top of the summit. That is such a better way to do it. You're either going to climb one or the other reasons. And the first few years of my freelancing, I was climbing the mountain based on fear of the rising water behind me. And if I didn't climb, I was going to drown. Instead, I started climbing later on when I started to build my agency. I started climbing based on wanting to conquer the mountain and climb to the top and put my flag in the top. Man, that's so much more fun of a journey. So much more fun.
Yeah.
You're looking, you're looking behind you. You're the fear, you're looking behind you saying, oh no, I'm going to die. I'm going to die.
Yeah.
The other one, you're like looking at the summit saying, oh my gosh, I'm going to get up there and it's going to be the most beautiful views ever. And I'm going to feel so good about getting to the top. It's such a better way to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the fear of the valley being flooded is also in the job seat when you are working as an employee. What I felt was like, I'm just chasing money to get paid, getting able to pay my bills and surviving in a metro city, something like that. But when I started by freelancing, I'm absolutely having a very, we all experience turbulent phases of revenue. Like, there is, sometimes there is zero, then sometimes there is like, you are the richest person on the planet. So it is always there. Yeah. But you always have that feeling of ambition.
To escape that. Yeah, that fear, it's like wired into us. It's genetically wired into us. The survival mode, the fear of death, the fear of failure, it's all just built into our DNA. And you do have to sometimes create a conscious effort to shove that down and say, okay, I'm not going to do this because of fear. I'm going to do it because of achievement driven.
Exactly. That is the best way to do anything.
It is so much better. It's so much more fun.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing I was very curious that in your vast experience, what made you write books? Like you mentioned that you already had this, I can do this thing, but what made you write 3 books, not one?
Yeah, I
Would you like
don't
to tell
know.
us about that? Yeah.
Yeah. So my first book, Burn
Mm-hmm.
Your Portfolio, I had a little goal exercise I did. I made my bucket list one time
Mm-hmm.
early on in my agency years. I kind of wrote down a bucket list. What do I want to accomplish? And on it, there were things like swim in one of those shark cages with sharks swimming around and stuff. I had things like that. I had travel to certain places, like go to Machu Picchu, which I did.
Mm-hmm.
So I had things like that. And one of the things I was like, you know what? I'd like to write a book someday. I'm going to write a book someday. And for years, it was on this bucket list that I had. And it wasn't until I spoke at a conference in 2007. I spoke at a design conference in Nashville, Tennessee. And I spoke about the non-design things that designers have to do to succeed in their career. And all the other speakers were speaking about design and design principles and their history and their portfolio and design ideas. And mine was about business or how to succeed as a creative. And afterwards, I had tons of people come up to me and say, "Oh man, that was so great. I loved your talk." And they were sending me their notes and stuff. And then I had this experience where one of the speakers had written a book, and he was there signing his book for one of the people, and I was standing next to him talking. So he was signing his book that somebody had brought, and then that person turned to me, and they were like, "Oh, here," and they gave me their notepad, and I signed their notepad because I didn't have a book, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is a total fail. I need to have a book if I'm going to speak at these kinds of conferences. I need to have a book like everybody else at this place." And so that's when I had the first spark to write my book. And I wrote it about all the non-design things that designers need to do to succeed in their career. And I wrote it over like 5 years of time because I was running my agency. So I would write when I was on vacation or on an airplane or something, I would write chapters of it. And it wasn't until 5 years later that I finally started trying to get it published, which I sent it to 3 publishers and got an offer from one, and the rest is history. And then now I know I can do it. And so now I'm driven. I'm going to write another book at some point. I have a couple that are on my list of books to write. Anyway.
Cool. Yeah, that competitive factor came in.
Competitive. That's what it is. Yeah. Good catch. That's what it is. I'm standing there. I don't have a book. He has a book. He's not better than me. I can write a book. That was the competitive tribe.
Cool, cool. It was great knowing you. That was really great, I would say. So let's get back to the topic. Keeping the time in mind. That's like the whole topic of this whole idea of this podcast. This particular episode will be about selling your services. So I will ask one thing. Tell us your experience while you were as a freelancer selling your services and when you were as an agency owner. What was the biggest difference that you experienced and what made you shift things?
Oh, that's a really good question. So the big difference between selling your services as a freelancer and selling your services as an agency is the way that a client perceives you in most cases. It's not always, but it is in client perception. And when you're a freelancer, a lot of clients perceive you as a production person. I need a logo, there's my designer. I need business cards, there's my designer. I need a website, I'm going to hire a designer. That's the type of problem that they come to you with. They have self-diagnosed and self-prescribed what they need. As an agency, it shifts a little bit where people start to come to you with their actual problem, which is things like, I need to get more sales. I need to get more leads. I need to sell more products on my website. They come to you with those kinds of problems, and then you prescribe the solution. Okay, let's rebuild your website on this e-commerce platform with this e-commerce UX strategy and it will generate more sales to you. Or let's rebrand your business so that it appeals to the target customer better and therefore will generate more leads, which will turn into more sales for you. That's the difference, is the way the clients perceive you, freelancer to agency. Now, it's not always the case. Some freelancers have built a reputation that they are brought in for that problem-solving thing, but most freelancers are brought in to just design the thing. The client's like, I need somebody to design the thing, and that's most freelancers. But it's not impossible to shift and become an expert in the eyes of your client and have that seat at the table where you're helping them understand their problem and solve that problem for them. The bigger problems is what I'm talking about. So I think that's a big difference.
Yeah, that is a huge difference. But what if a freelancer wants to work with the big clients, clients like Disney, Google, and people like the big names in the industry, and wants to be treated as an expert, like the reputation that you mentioned? How a freelancer can differentiate himself or herself?
I mean, you have to look the part. So this is the challenge that a lot of freelancers have, is that they want to work for Disney, and then their portfolio is filled with work for electricians and lawyers and plumbers and dentists. And you're just never going to land those types of clients with a portfolio that showcases work that's different from the type of work that they do. So you have to build a portfolio that looks the part. A lot of people do this on Behance. You'll see a lot of concept projects. You'll see somebody that redesigns the Netflix interface, or they redesign Disney's brand or National Geographic brand or something. They redesign Hulu's interface. People are doing this, and it's a great way to showcase your ability to work with those types of clients. So that's step number one. You have to look like you belong in their world. And that means have work that relates to the type of work that they are going to want you to do. And then the next thing is you have to build relationships with somebody. You cannot just call Disney and say, hey, can I speak with the creative director? I'm a freelancer. I want to work with the creative director. You can't make that call. There's no cold calling. And those people have just been bombarded on LinkedIn most of the time. So you have to start building a relationship. Now, you and I did this. You did this with me in the DMs. You sent me a message. You were positive, or you were flattering with the type of thing. I love your work, that kind of stuff. I'd love to have you on my podcast. You built a relationship with me. I used to work at Fox. I built an agency. I had clients like that. And here I am talking with you. So anybody can do that same thing with other people, with anybody from any business. Look for them on LinkedIn, and don't just go in and go for the ask, can you give me some work? Go in and start building a genuine relationship with that person, not asking for anything in return. And the way you build a genuine relationship is go and just be what a friend would be. If they post something, comment on it. If you see something in the news that relates to them, send it to them. Start to treat those people like a friend and be supportive of them. And then who knows what doors it will open. You mentioned Mitri, our mutual friend, and I've been friends with her for like 5 years, and it all has happened in the DMs, and I've never sent any work to her. She's never sent any coaching students to me or anything. It's just been a mutual friendship, but I have a high degree of trust with her. I've done collaborations with her a couple of times. She's on if she DMs me, I'll reply within the hour of the time that she DMs me. She'll jump to the top of the list. And I have a lot of people like that will jump to the top of the list because they have a relationship with me. You can do that with anybody. Go find them on LinkedIn. You want to get in with Disney, go and start to build a genuine friendship with people who work at Disney. Don't try and sell them anything. Just be a friend to them and let karma or the universe open doors for you in the future, because it will. Exactly. It does.
Exactly. Absolutely. Like people want to work with people. So that is the epitome of everything that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Nobody can work without having a trust or a good relationship. An authentic relationship is something that I have experienced people don't have. Or like everyone is coming, hey, I need work, I need to do this. If you have any work, give it to me. I'm like, bro, I
Yeah.
don't even know you who you are.
Yes, it's exactly what, yeah. I think the exact thing, I look at the exact thing, I'm like, bro, I don't even know you. And that's how I think. I don't reply to them that way, but that's what I think in my head for sure.
The same thing. I just think in my mind, I don't even know how can I give you work. I just keep it, okay, I
Yeah.
will see. I don't want to be rude,
Yeah.
so I just reply, if I can, then okay, cool, I will
Yeah.
see.
It can happen. It can happen, but it has to be super perfectly timed, and you don't control that timing. But it has to drop into their inbox right at the moment when they have pain about the thing you're
Yeah.
trying to sell them. And I'll give you an example. I just hired a new YouTube SEO person, and I get people reaching out to me every week about, hey, I can improve your YouTube SEO, your YouTube search, blah, blah, blah. Every week I get those. But I had somebody a few days ago who dropped in right at a moment when I was looking at my analytics and I was thinking, man, I'm not getting the organic reach that I want to get from my videos. I need to get somebody who can do that for me and do a better job than what I can. And then poof, this person showed up in my inbox at that moment when I had pain. That's what it had. Now, how many emails did that person have to send out in order to get one to land on someone at the exact moment when they had pain to be able to hire them? Thousands of emails, probably thousands before somebody hit. If that person would have built a relationship with me in advance, it would have been so much easier. I wouldn't have looked at any of the strangers. I would have been like, okay, it's time. I better call my friend who I've been building a relationship with for the past year. That's who I'll call.
Yeah, exactly. And that is the harsh reality of cold calls and outreach. I am experiencing that. I recently started it and it is hard. It is even more.
It is hard.
It is hard, yeah. So cool. Moving ahead, like I have a lot of questions, but I would like to keep it short and brief and as much valuable as it can be, because you have, like, how can I phrase it? The gold mine of knowledge in terms of creative business and creative
Thank you.
creativity. Yeah. So, what were the mistakes that you did as a beginner in your career, and how do you think people can learn from that?
The mistakes.
Yeah.
I already shared one that I think was probably my biggest mistake ever, and it was being fear motivated.
Yeah.
That was my biggest mistake. Because my early years of freelancing, we did not grow very much. I was doing good revenue for a solo freelancer, but I wasn't growing, and I was kind of resisting the growth that my business actually wanted to have. So that was a big mistake. Another mistake was not selling when I was buried with work. And so I would be super busy, and I call this out on people all the time, but this is the problem. They are busy with work, and so they're just stuck doing, got to get the work done, And then they finish their projects, and now they don't have any new projects because they weren't selling while they were doing the work. And so then they go and they start to panic sell. And panic selling is like, oh crap, I don't have any projects. I better reach out to everybody I can. I got to start cold emailing, and I got to try and build. I got to get more people, and I'm panic selling. And then that generates opportunities. And then they go and they're busy again, and then they don't sell. And it's just that roller coaster of not selling to panic selling, to not selling to panic selling. And that was a big mistake that I made the first few years of my agency. So I had those big swings in cash flow as a result. And it wasn't until I started to realize I have to make sales and marketing an everyday thing in my business. I should be doing something that relates to sales.
That makes sense. Yeah, I've been taught that particular thing. The moment you stop focusing on your business, there will be no business. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's great. Glad you share that. So people I hope people make sure to work on their business as well as while they're working in their business, and making sure that
Yes.
they keeping it a daily habit to do that. So
Yeah.
moving ahead, I have one different kind of thing. Like, this is the biggest challenge that I have experienced. Like, in terms of branding, whenever we have to sell our services, we always have one problem, that we can't guarantee a tangible return on investment. That we can't say that if you get a branding or if you get a rebrand, you will get 100 CR or 100 million in sales. We can guarantee
Yeah.
that kind of things. So how do we
Yeah.
tackle that problem? How do we make our value proposition strong? What's your take on this?
Yeah. I like to use
Hmm.
data from the
Okay.
past. So I can say, okay,
Hmm.
we did the same work for somebody else and they had X percentage of growth, or they
Hmm.
had X percentage of improvement to the leads that came in. So when you can have data points like that, that's what I try and use. Now, if you don't have data like that, you can
Hmm.
use data from the industry in general and say things like, design-led businesses outperform the general stock market by 237% or whatever the statistic is. And so you can say, we're going to turn you into a design-led business, and you should
Hmm.
outperform other businesses that don't take that same approach. So you can use your own data, or you can use industry-wide data, or you can just use testimonials. And this is where some people are, where they just say, you know what? I can tell you, I don't have data that is going to guarantee you any results, but
Hmm.
this is a quote from our last client that we did work with, Sally, and she said, well, working with Vaibhav was so amazing. His team was so good. They did awesome work, and we're seeing great fruits in our business. You know, that could be some kind of phrasing
Hmm.
like that, and you just share that testimonial. There is risk, and I think you can point this out to clients. There's risk in
Hmm.
any investment. You could
Yeah.
invest in Apple today, and is it going to go up or down? You don't know. You don't know. You can safely assume that Apple is going to continue to innovate and continue to bring better revenue year over year as their business continues to grow, because historically you can see that that's happened. But you don't have any guarantee, and there are very few guarantees in business. What we
Hmm.
can say, this is what I'd say to a client, what we can say is that we do great work. We know it will generate results for you, and some of those results will be intangible. They might be brand perception or brand
Yeah.
awareness, that the more people have a higher esteem for your brand, it will make it easier for your salespeople to close deals because your
Hmm.
brand looks better. But that's not really tangible. You just make the investment with the
Hmm.
expectation that that's going to happen. And that's what design-led businesses do. So I would probably
Hmm.
kind of take that approach to a client, saying that they
Great.
want
Yeah,
a
that is
guarantee.
great.
There's
That
no
is interesting.
guarantee.
Even I got to learn this new thing. So glad you shared
Good.
that. Yeah. So one thing about selling to different kind of businesses, like companies. So is it different, or is it hard to sell small companies as compared to selling to a big company? Like, for example, company with 1 to 10 employees versus a company to 500 plus employees. Is it hard to sell
Yeah.
them our creative services?
Um, okay, so
Hmm.
the difference is this: small companies, the owner of the business feels the investment
Hmm.
on creative services in their own pocket. So you have a CEO of a 10-person restaurant. He has
Hmm.
10 employees total. They crank out their restaurant, and he's going to invest in redesigning their brand, and he's going to spend $8,000 with you to do it. That CEO looks at
Hmm.
it and says, okay, that's either $8,000 I spend there, or it's $8,000 of profit that my
Hmm.
business could have. And that profit, what else could I do with it? Well, I could take my family on vacation to Hawaii. That's what I could do with it. So, do I want to go take my family to Hawaii, or do I want to redesign my brand? This is the kind of comparison that they make. Now,
Hmm.
companies with big
Hmm.
number of employees, they don't look at it that way. Most of the people that you're working with are a marketing manager or marketing director or something, and they look at it as a budget line item. And their budget says you have $20,000 to spend on this initiative. And if they spend $18,000 of it, it doesn't mean that they get $2,000 back in their pocket. It just means that the company gets $2,000 back in their pocket. Or if they don't spend it at all, then they don't get the $20,000. So this is the difference. So a lot of times it's easier to sell to a bigger company because they're not emotionally making the decision at all. There's no, they want to spend the budget because that's the number that they got from whoever is establishing the budgets for marketing at their bigger company. So I think it is easier to sell to those bigger companies, but you can't use all the same tactics. Like the small businesses, you can help a CEO see that an $8,000 investment in doing a project with you could generate for them a $15,000 return on the investment. And they would look at that and say, oh, okay, that's perfect. That's what I want. You can't do that. If I went to Google Marketing Manager and said, okay, if you do this project with us and it's $50,000 and we do a good job, then Google is going to make $500 billion and $30,000 this year instead of $500 billion. Doesn't that sound good to you? You don't do that to a Google Marketing Manager. They don't care. And Google doesn't see the needle move at all because of the $30,000 extra revenue that you bring in for their business based on the investment. So you can't use some of those tools or those sales tactics from that you would use with a small business, and you can't use those with a bigger business.
Perfect. That was very interesting analogy. So I've never thought of it like that. So it gives me the clear idea of what to do, what not to do. So before we wind up this thing, one piece of advice that you would like, two questions. A, one piece of advice to people who are in a sales call pitching their creative services about the things that they should never do. And B, any general golden piece of advice to freelancers or early agency founders or who are just jumping in creative industry that you would like to give. What would you say?
Never do. What should you never do? I think you should never cave on your price right out of the gate. So you pitch something to a client and say, okay, we charge $3,000 for that. And then the client says, oh, darn, I only have $2,000. And you say, oh, okay, I'll do it for $2,000. Never do that. Don't cave on your price first. You can cave on your price, but do it after you've tried some other tactics to sell them. So you pitch $3,000, they say, dang, we only have $2,000. And then you say, let me walk you through our process and show you how we're going to get good result for you. Or let's talk about the success that we did with one of our other clients and show how your $3,000 can turn into more revenue for you. Or let's show you the before and after of one brand that we did and another brand that we did. Doesn't this look so much better? This looks like a $3,000 branding project. This looks like it was done at home with a template. And so you can try and use some other tactics. You can use scope. Okay, let's look at reducing the budget based on the scope and reduce the scope. If we reduce the scope, then we can reduce the budget. What do you think about that? And so that's the better way to go about it, but don't cave right out of the gate. And that's what some people do. They pitch something for $500. The client says, oh, darn, can you do it cheaper? And then you say, okay, yeah, I'll do it for $400. And then they say, no, that's not enough. How about cheaper? Okay, $300. And then they just grind you down. And you didn't even put up a fight. Put up a fight, stick behind your price, try and sell them in other ways before you look at ways to reduce the investment from them. Okay, so that's the never do. The golden piece of advice, this is the thing that we touched on it a bunch of different ways today, but the thing that I think is the most valuable thing you can do in your whole career is build relationships with other people. It's why you and I are on this podcast right now. I could have said no, but I was like, yeah, he seems like a nice guy. I watched a couple of your little videos and stuff, and I was like, okay. He has a little audience that he's growing on Instagram. You got 6,000 people on Instagram now, and so you're putting in the effort. I was like, okay, I'll go be on that podcast and have that conversation with him, build relationships, and now we have the start of a relationship with each other, and that has all the value in all the world. Building those relationships, that's where the magic is in business and in life in general. I mean, it's so great knowing people all over the world. Some of my favorite experiences over the last few years is when I flew to Dubai, and I had people who came to a meetup, like people who follow me in Dubai, and we had a little meetup. And then these two guys took me, and we went to some cool places off the beaten path because I was with them. And so it's that kind of thing. I've done that in Sweden and other countries. Denmark, we did a meetup in Denmark. And I spent 2 days with one of the people that I met through Instagram, and it's all just relationship driven. And it's so fun that in today's world, you can build relationships with anyone, including creative directors at Disney or Google or wherever you want to try and do work. You can build relationships with those people, and you can build relationships with people with me who are sharing content and trying to help others. You can build relationships with anybody that you choose to try and build a relationship with. They have to reciprocate, and some people don't, but some people will. Some people will.
Perfect. That was really the golden piece of advice, because nobody talks about relationships. I have seen people busy, like, I have to make money, I have to do the business, I am focused on my business, I'm a business person. So they are so chasing something that is not even there. So
it's so true.
With that, would you like to conclude with anything else? We have few minutes left.
No, that's good. You had great questions. It was awesome. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited, and I'll share this out when you post. Make sure you tag me up and stuff. Yeah.
Cool. So that was the episode. That was the biggest episode of this podcast. Thank you, Michael. It was a dream of mine to have you on my podcast.
Oh, thank you.
You and people like you are on the list, on the guest list, like dream guest list in the podcast whenever I was having this idea. So thank you so much. This was the most energetic and most valuable podcast I have ever had till now. So I still have a lot of questions, but for another time, for next time. But yeah,
we'll do it another podcast someday.
Definitely. Okay. Cool. So मिलते हैं अगले में. Thank you everyone.
Thank you
Michael. So